welcome to another installment in our NFP podcast series. I'm Joe Byrne. I'm joined today with Emily Parker and Katy Balukas.
Hi, Joe. Nice to see you.
Today's topic is a really good one. And right before we popped the record button on, we were just talking about how, this is a topic where I think we're going to start to really be able to layer and stack and expand upon some of the other podcasts that we've already done in our series for those that are listening in. Today's topic specifically is going to be in the realm of uniform guidance. So I get to play host today, outside of a few questions that are on the 990, which basically ask if you have needed a uniform guidance audit, and then B, did you do it? There's really not much on the tax side. I mean, there's some grant reporting and things like that, again, we've gotten into in another topic, but really Emily and Katy are the uniform guidance experts here. So with that, we'll dive right in. Katy, Emily, what are some of the common findings that we're seeing related to these uniform guidance audits?
Yes, I think one of the biggest ones that we see a lot relates to suspension and debarment. So that's the requirement that the feds have a list of individuals that have committed some type of wrongdoing in the past, whether it's related to mishandling federal funds or simply defaulting on your student loans. You can end up on a list as being suspended or debarred, which means you cannot receive any funding through a federal grant program. So our clients that receive federal funds are required to verify this list, which is on sam.gov. They're required to verify this list before they pay an employee over $25,000 or they pay a vendor. And this is certainly something that gets missed. Sometimes our employees have a process to check their employees. Sometimes it's just once a year. This really needs to be an ongoing process because somebody can end up on this list one month and they weren't on it the month previously. So this is certainly something that we do see a lot where our clients do not have a process in place, because certainly with this area, it's not only that you have not paid a vendor or an employee that was suspended or debarred, but you also have a process in place to check that list and make sure that you're not paying anybody in advance. Because if you get into a situation where you pay someone that's been suspended or debarred, there are repercussions of you have to repay the federal government back any money that's been paid to this individual or this employee.
We definitely see that a lot, Katy. Another one, and it's sort of, you mentioned the process and how that's important. We look at the process, not just the outcomes. And part of an audit of uniform guidance, a single audit, you might also hear it called, it has to do with internal controls over compliance. So our audit is not, for example, just testing that the expenses make sense, but what were the controls around the expenses that allowed you to be sure you were paying something that's in line with the requirements. We do see internal control findings too, different things around. In the example I just provided, were invoices approved, things like that. We're also seeing a lot of new uniform guidance, first-time organizations having to be audited under the uniform guidance. With the different stimulus money that's come out over the last few years, organizations definitely have need and use of the funds that are available, but they are having to sort of backtrack a little bit to be sure they have the policies in place, procurement policies, for example, as required under the uniform guidance. So that's something we're seeing a lot. It's not too late. You can get the money and begin the process. It's not too late to put those internal controls in place, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yes, and I mean, that's definitely a good point with the internal controls over compliance, because certainly as part of all of your grants, you're required to submit performance reporting and financial reporting, sometimes on a monthly, quarterly basis. And doing the reporting is simply not enough. You also have to have a procedure in place, have controls in place to make sure that someone's preparing it and someone's reviewing it. So that's just always something to have in the back of your mind as it relates to internal controls over compliance, is that just making sure that you're spending the funds in line and doing all the steps as it relates to reporting is not enough. You also have to have those controls in place to verify that someone is reviewing and approving what's being done. So just having that in the back of your mind with every compliance requirement is what are the controls associated with that to make sure that you're setting yourself up.
That's good to know. Do you think that it's necessary or maybe a requirement that perhaps you have those sorts of policies documented somewhere?
Yes, and that's certainly something that we've seen a lot. Emily had alluded to all the new funding streams, and some of our clients that are really having these uniform guidance audits for the first time is that they don't have policies and procedures in place that really speak to these new requirements, or it's a matter of they have not reviewed their policies and procedures for several years. So I think once you have federal funds, it's really taking a look under the hood to make sure that you have all of the policies, that they're updating those that haven't been touched in 10 years to make sure that they're still relevant. Just making sure that that's being done prior to your audit beginning.
That sounds smart. Go ahead and check those policies out, see if they still make sense for the current times that we're in. I think that sounds like a good idea. How about any other common findings or any other issues that you folks are identifying or running into with these new funding streams? Anything there?
Yes, I think we're also seeing some findings related to the overall CFA preparation. For those that may not be aware, your CFA is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So that's the inventory of all of your federal funds by grant number, grant name, as well as the total expenditures for the year. And certainly with the new federal funding that has come out, some of it flows through directly from the federal government, some flows through the state. Some of it is commingled with state funds, so a percentage of it is federal. And we're seeing some issues with some of our clients where not all of the federal funds are getting onto this schedule. And that certainly could leave for an opportunity where an audit does not occur that you have a program that's not included on that list. So certainly working with your auditors in advance to say, hey, we just received this new grant. Can you take a look at it and see if you think that this is a federal fund or not? Just to make sure that that is complete at the time of your audit. Certainly, as your auditors, we're available throughout the year for questions. So certainly if you receive new federal funding, let us know and we can take a look. I think another challenge with the new federal funding is that when the ARPA funds came out, they introduced a new concept of the beneficiary. So in the past, you could either be a sub-recipient or a contractor. And really the big difference from a federal perspective is if you were a sub-recipient, you were carrying out the program on behalf of the federal government. Whereas if you're a contractor, you're just really completing a task on behalf of a grantee. And so they've also introduced a concept of beneficiary, which is where you've automatically qualified for the funding and there's really no action that's required on behalf of receiving these funds. And within the federal government and within the ARPA funds, a beneficiary is not required to undergo a single audit for those funds. And so that's another thing that we're certainly seeing is our clients are not necessarily aware of whether they've been deemed to be a sub-recipient, a contractor, or a beneficiary. And I will say that from reviewing some of the grant agreements, it's not always very clear. So in those instances, certainly talk to your auditors to see if they can take a look at the grant agreements and make a determination, help you with that, or help you make that determination. But then also don't be afraid to reach out to the grantor to see if they can provide some insight as to how they have you recorded. Because certainly if you make the determination that you're a beneficiary, but the federal government sees you as a sub-recipient, then there are different requirements you have to undergo in terms of whether you have a single audit performed or whether there's actually no action required on your part.
You make a good point about the difference between the direct funding from the federal government and a subrecipient funding. So just to really underline that, the subrecipient really is when you're getting money from someone other than the federal government directly. And you gave the example, Katie, of state funding, and that is quite common, in our client base, that they get a little bit directly from the federal government, but also get some from the state government. And the uniform guidance requirements, the 2 CFR 200, we can also look there for more information. They outline the information that the grantor is supposed to provide to the subrecipient, which should make it really simple for us to know, is this money that should belong on your CFA? Or are you a beneficiary? Those requirements are pretty clear and outlined in the guidance. We also recognize that doesn't always flow directly through the way we would like it to, and really reaching out to your grantor is the best solution to that. If it isn't clear, if the grant, after we've taken a look at it, you likely will just need to get more information, and that will allow you to really help maintain your compliance. We've also been seeing, not only new uniform guidance audits, but some organizations haven't even had to have regular financial statement audits before. And that's another a place where organizations are working very hard to get their internal control systems documented, as you mentioned, Joe, and really trying to bring things up to speed quickly so they can be compliant with these new funds.
So like I said at the top, we're starting to kind of weave these podcasts together here. So I heard a bit about audit preparedness in there, right? That there are things that, we can offer up front. We can look at grant documents and documentation, make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I think the last question I'm going to throw out to you both, and it's kind of a candid one, and so feel free to toss it back if you go no comment, that's okay. But here's my question. In your eyes, what is a ideal or a dream uniform guidance audit? What does that look like when you guys walk in to the clients, if we still are walking, if we're not doing it virtually, but when you're walking in, what does the dream uniform guidance audit look like to you both?
I'd say it definitely starts with the CFA, so the Schedule of Expenditure of Federal Awards, having that in advance so we're able to prepare for your audit. So certainly with the uniform guidance audit, there's a lot of transactional testing. We're testing sometimes 25, 40, or even 60 transactions for accounts payable and payroll. So that's a huge administrative lift for any of our clients. So having that CFA in advance so we can make determinations, make selections for testing prior to arriving or prior to the start of our virtual fieldwork to give your teams ample time to pull the support, I think certainly starts both sides on the right foot. I think having that Schedule of Expenditure of Federal Awards reconciled to the general ledger is another big piece, because certainly that's something that we need to verify as auditors that it reconciles. But if we're provided that roadmap right up front, then it certainly is an easier process, and we know we're starting from the right place.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree, Katie. And it's really, when you think about the types of programs that are subject to audit under the uniform guidance, they are so numerous. There is not one type of program that you audit. It could be financial aid for a college or university. It could be Head Start. It could be, for a community action agency, for example. It could be a research and development program. It's the funding available to organizations from the federal government is really quite broad. But the same basic tenets under each of those programs remain around making sure you have your contracts aligned, making sure you have an understanding of the federal requirements and the internal controls around them.
Okay, clients, take note. That's what Katie and Emily are looking for when they're walking into one of these uniform guidance audits. So anything else here before we close out here?
No, I mean, certainly we'll be talking more about this topic, I think, in the upcoming months, as there's a lot of discussion in terms of some changes coming to the uniform guidance. Every year, the federal government puts out the new requirements that we're following as it relates to performing these audits, but there's certainly some discussions of increasing thresholds as it relates to when these audits start to be required. Currently, it's receiving and expending over $750,000 in a given year, but that could be increasing to $1 million, which would certainly ease the administrative burden of these audits on some of our clients that are just under that or just over the $750,000 threshold. So that's something we'll certainly be keeping everyone apprised of as information becomes available to us. But certainly I think this is a topic that come the spring or summer, it may be relevant to get on another podcast to talk through any upcoming changes, just to keep everyone aware.
Sounds good. We'll be here. With that, I think we'll close up. I want to thank Emily and Katie again for all their expertise in this area. Again, stay tuned as there are developments in this area and other areas. We will keep clients apprised as necessary, and you might hear about this topic again in an upcoming podcast. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.